Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with registered dietitian and somatic nutrition therapist, Tracy Brown. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom. Largely from rigid diets and painful body image, but ultimately it's about the freedom to be yourself. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Friends, welcome back. This is actually part 2 of Season 1, Episode 25 that featured Tracy, and it had so many cliffhangers that I had to bring her back to get to each of them. And I definitely suggest you go back and listen to that episode first to get filled in on Tracy's eating disorder background and her education background, as well as to get caught up on all of the amazing stuff that she shared in that first episode. And today we wanted to dive into a bit of what it takes to create an experience of feeling safe in our bodies. Because so many of the things that we do, whether it's constantly trying to stay on this really tight diet plan, or if we're overeating, binge eating, compulsive eating, they're super hard to address when we're in a constant state of stress and not feeling settled and safe in our bodies. And what's interesting too is that we might actually think we feel fine. We just maybe like food too much. But as you'll hear us discuss, in cases like this, and this was definitely true for me, we often don't know what it's like to feel safe and good and at home in our bodies. You won't hear this, but partway through our interview, Tracy had to pause and let me know that she was actually in her car in the middle of a rainstorm and needed to get home and call me back. And I remember just being so impressed at how centered and clear she had been that whole time, because I had no idea that she was in the middle of this stressful situation. And then how low drama and simple it was to resolve. And it was easy. And it really, I felt like, spoke to the personal work that she's done. And so in this conversation, you'll hear us talk about a Facebook group that we're admins in, both of us. And if you're curious, it's the Intuitive Eating Support Group. Anybody can join. We pulled a couple questions from the folks over there into our conversation, and I'll link that group if what we talk about today speaks to you. And if you're interested in any more of my work, my private Facebook group is called Free Spirit Academy, and I'm always in there answering personal questions, often through video, on topics like emotional eating, body image, self-love, and pretty much anything that you hear on any episode of this podcast. So moving on, I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tracy Brown. So the last time that we spoke, and as I listened back, like I was telling you just a second ago, there's never been a podcast interview where we've said so many times, either I've said it or you've said it, like, gosh, there needs to be a whole nother podcast on that topic. So I want to take this opportunity to just package up some of your amazing wisdom and experience in the world of attuned eating and finding peace and freedom as we're moving through painful relationships with food and our bodies. And I actually went through our first conversation and I took down every time that we had that moment of like, oh, we could dive deeper into this for hours and we really don't have time, so we're going to gloss over it. And I just grabbed those. So I'm going to dive into each of these moments and just let you run with them.
That sounds super fun. I'm really excited to be back again to talk about all those moments, to get more nuance to it, to answer, some questions I know that we had people ask us to talk about possibly, and again, to see where this goes, to bring as much value to people and their actual tangible things that people can do in their own journey here. So happy to be back, and let's go. Let's get started.
Awesome. Amazing. So the first moment where that sort of popped out is we were talking about stress and the impact of stress as we're learning to listen to our bodies and how it can kind of make that challenging. So when I bring that up, when I say stress and listening to the body, what comes up for you?
I think about the fact that we are born into, and we all live in a really, at least Western, if you're in a Western country, high pace, high fast, high pace. And it's really difficult sometimes to be as grounded as would be helpful to actually know how we feel. Or when I say stress, it doesn't always mean I have a big workload or I have a ton of responsibility, and then it makes it more difficult for me to give myself permission to slow down, to listen to my signals, or I just don't even know how to do that for all kinds of reasons. It could be that we can inherit it. Basically, our parents' stress, our parents' struggles with being as present as well. So sometimes we start off that way, and it's not your fault. It's almost like then some of our jobs is to learn how to slow down enough to build our window of tolerance for feeling what we feel, to be able to be more in tune with our signals. And so I just want to start off with, I don't want to go too deep into that so we can kind of go back and forth, but just to be able to know that, like, kind of part of our world. And I think as we get more present to that, the reality as a fact, you can take the pressure off yourself for what's wrong with me, why can't I get this? And more it's like, oh, what is the soup I'm living in right now? Either my own thoughts or feelings about my food or my weight, and my own stress and traumas about that, as well as like what's going on around me that actually makes it not all that conducive to be able to slow down.
Right. I think that's really important to say, because I think we live in a world where there's all of these quick fixes, including like, how do I cut down on my stress real quick? Like, how do I do a quick meditation? Right. I feel better. And that's how I often very often see people using like short, maybe guided meditations, is when I'm really freaked out, then I do this guided meditation and I sort of bring myself down and I get grounded and I get present, but it's not really this sustainable thing that we're creating. We're not changing our systems at all. We're just sort of managing maybe a little bit in those the time that it takes, like you're saying, to sort of create that safety within the body.
Right.
And I think that should take a load off of people, I hope, to realize that it's not just like a quick thing that you can do. Like, there's a lot.
No, I want to share with you, you are rebuilding probably a part of your nervous system that wasn't all that strong to begin with. And so it takes time. I mean, I think, again, I wish I could remember one of my teachers. It was, her name's Karen Scotto DeLuzia, and she had told me, and I wish I could remember where she told me this research comes from, but minimally, it's like 40 days to build like a little chink of a new neural pathway to doing something different, a little bit more automatically with less like white knuckling to do it. So it takes a long time. And we all have that experience, whether through sort of recovery or, breaking free from diet culture and dieting less and more connection with how we use food, is that I've never met anybody that, okay, I'm done binging now, or I'm done eating food for, calming myself or numbing myself or whatever. We don't really make that decision. Okay, I'm done. We have to build a platform for that's doable. So it does take time, and it's almost but for most people, it happens in increments, and it can happen in bigger chunks once we get more aware of, like, oh, I do this body bashing. Oh, this is this thing I do. And either what just happened, or what was the thought or feeling that just arose, or what was that somatic memory or sensation that just happened, and can I be with that? And if the first step is I can do that, the next step will be, and I could hang with that, and then I could find my feet and I can come back to that, and I'm noticing that it loosens up a little bit, and then that's the progression. So it's something that you actually have to do every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it doesn't have to be, I have to take a half hour out of my day to listen, to a meditation every day. It can be just little times of being more present to yourself doing that. That's what rewires your life. It's not really just in like all these little spot treatments. It's like, having the courage. It takes a lot of courage to like, ooh, I'm going to feel something that feels kind of icky. And okay, that's as much as I can do with that without not being able to function. And I'm going to feel my feet again, or I'm going to like orient towards some nature. And all right, now I feel more clear again, or feel like, okay, I'm okay. That's kind of exactly what the process looks like. I mean, a little different for each person, but there's a level. That's what you're doing over and over and over and over again. And the way the doorway in with food and weight, like thoughts and behaviors and all those kind of things, it kind of, because eating is a body process, we don't have much say over how we digest. or hardly in at all, or how much urine we produce, or our respiration rate in terms of actually deciding those things. It kind of teaches you those lessons about how your body is doing most of these processes. So when you get an extra assignment on your plate at work, you might feel your heart rate raise. Okay. And you might not notice that that's kind of what happens for you. But there's some belief about like that. Otherwise it would just be like, okay, there's more to do, but I'm competent. I'm the adult. I know what to do.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And there were a couple of things that you mentioned that I really appreciated. And so I am always emphasizing this, and you emphasize this a lot too. Like it takes time, like baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And we often want these leaps, like the quick fix. I just want to get there. What's the thing I need to do? But as like you were saying, there are leaps. You just kind of don't know when they're going to come. You have to do the steady, slow, gentle work. And then sometimes it's like a bright insight and you're leaping forward in life very different after that moment. So it happens, but it's almost a natural effect of allowing things to flow.
Yeah, it's a natural fact of like just starting off with this kind of, I don't mean to be negative. There's a little bit of like a grind to it. Like, okay, I'm going to show up for myself again this moment. And it's not always pretty and easy. And we see it a lot that people just keep showing up. And there's that, that's what I want people to recognize, that like there is a lot of inner drive for truth. And pretty much every single person I've ever worked with or known that struggle with losing weight, because like we kind of know this isn't our natural way of being. Like we weren't meant to be this way, and yet we still show up to kind of like check in and do the icky anyway. And before you know it, it's like, oh, I mean, this is like, maybe bigger picture, but you end up feeling more awake and more normal than most people who haven't been through something like this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's more transformative, I think, in ways that we aren't expecting. And the grind, like you're saying that, and I totally hear what you're saying. Like when you're like, I don't want to be negative. And I say that too, like sometimes you need to show up. And I think that there's a tone to showing up that can make all the difference, where it's like, okay, just doing the thing again, rather than being like, oh, doing this thing, got to do the thing, push, push, push. It's like, nope, here I am again.
Right.
Oh, I'm really tired, but here I am again. And you just showing up.
And I'm going to just kind of draft right off that and say that showing up is what we never had.
Yes.
Literally, like that style of, oh my gosh, yeah, I just feeling really tired. Well, what do you need right now? Versus, oh, well, our world is you're feeling really tired. Well, can you do just one more little thing and then you can earn your rest? Or can you, and that's how it feeds into diet culture. You can see how it's an easy leap when you're young. If everything around you like that and none is present, it's pretty easy to see by the time you're 10 years old, you're thinking, well, that's my solution. I don't feel good. And people around me maybe are different or something. I don't feel right here and it must be my body. So let's fix that now.
Mm-hmm. That makes me want to go back to, because you were talking about, and I want to talk a lot today about the nervous system. So the reason why we're so stressed and why it's not an easy fix to just come out of that stress or pop out of that stress and just be done with it. What are some of the things that have created such wonky and out of balance nervous systems to begin with?
Well, that's a really, really hard question, because it's usually just like, development of chronic eating issues. Like there's a lot of factors. One of them being dysregulated nervous system function. So maybe people haven't heard much about that before, but it's not the old system. We all kind of learn probably in science class that you have your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. Well, actually, there's two main branches of parasympathetic, and one kind of runs like that freeze response of like kind of playing dead, and things going really slow and protective and kind of numbed out, spaced out. And the other part is our social, our ability to problem solve and socially connect. That's the part in a lot of people that didn't get enough juice, usually enough like feeding when we were in some part of our life, really, really, really young before we have memories. Maybe times when we have memories that just like, we didn't quite get enough of what we attunement. And so that kind of flavors for maybe a lot of our life, how we show up for ourselves. Mm-hmm. Like, again, when we're hungry, when we're tired, when we're under stress, we don't really know how to really tend to the signals we're getting because we think they're not important enough, or we need to just push through. So I'll just give you some examples. Or you can have your system working pretty well, but then something happens, an accident happens, or again, some kind of trauma happens where it just really kind of shakes that foundation, and it can take some time. You kind of have to like coax yourself back into like things are safe by providing slowed down, safe experiences, like being able to orient to what's good, orient to what's safe around you. And sometimes that's not other people, or food, but it can be, it can be nature, it can be animals, it can be just being able to actually feel like you can take in or register what is around you that's good.
Yes,
and practice that over and over.
That's ultimately what we're feeling, right? Like if your nervous system is out of balance, we're feeling unsafe. That's often why we reach diets, or we feel like, oh my God, if my body just looked this way, I would feel fine again, or whatever the thing is that we reach, but we simply don't feel safe. Right.
You don't feel safe or even know what that looks like. So, it's like an adaptive strategy. Really, I see all dieting, restricting, binging, purging, all that drive to be less, feel less. We're actually trying to manage internal overwhelm, one direction or the other. And we all can, and the thing is, you can only be in fight or flight so long, and your body will, crash. And that's where I see people who have a lot of, people label it, adrenal fatigue and stuff like that, or just really chronic, I can't get going, just cannot get going. And that's a space where your body has just been too depleted for too long. And I know adrenal fatigue is kind of like one of those very controversial things to say that people we label that is. But it's usually a sign that we've been going too fast, too hard, too long. And that's the body's response. It's like, I can't do it. I'm done. I can't do it anymore. And that's a more extreme version of what people have gone through when they've been in too much stress for too long. So, and I also think that's what happens when we've been dieting is we're up. You're up in your head with your rules, or you're obsessive, compulsive, counting, measuring, macro counting. It seems like it's a good solution to manage our fear, our anxiety, our shame, our frustration. If we just do this, then I'll be okay. Yeah. And I think that's the number one thing when people stop dieting, or they're not needing to use eating to a certain level of fullness to feel okay. I start finding that's when the emotions come up, and we both experience that. If people feel worse usually before they feel better, not because they're doing something wrong, it's that they're feeling more.
Yes. And I see this so often in the intuitive eating Facebook group, is that people feel there's a lot of guilt around why can't I get out of diet culture, or why am I feeling worse? I let go of this. And there's so much innocence in it. We pull towards the strict diet. We lean into the strict diet because that feels safe. That feels in control. So to pull away from that, it's going to really freak you out. You're going to want to go back. And there's
I think I think this is what our whole conversation really is about, is to give people some hope that you're gonna wind all this stuff in different stages and recognize it. I think it's normal at the beginning to want to know the cognitive stuff, because that's what we're used to using as a tool to help manage our fear.
Yes.
Our fear, our shame, our oh my gosh, if I don't do this, I don't know who I am or what I'm gonna do, or it can feel bodily, like the world's falling apart, and our brains function is to help us make meaning of what we're feeling if we're not all that, if we don't have the answers to it, because a lot of these things we don't remember or know where this came from because we're just so in it. So I think it's really normal when people ask questions like, is this the right way to do, steal stuff? Or why can't I let go of hating my body even though I'm eating more intuitively, or all those things. And I think it's important to research these things and know there's another paradigm, and know that there's scientific reason for every bit of this stuff. That gives your brain something, but it's not knowing enough is not having all the information in the world isn't the substitute. You have to go further than that, which is I have to experience now all that's in me, that's what's hard.
It is hard.
And more, go ahead.
I'll just tie this in because I think it'll go right with whatever you're going to say. Sometimes those sensations that come up, this was something that you said in the last podcast. You said sometimes the feelings that need to be felt are so intense, it feels like we're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's not being dramatic. And that's not like, that's why we do all of these things to avoid, like, it is so intense, this sensation. And then the meaning that we make out of it, it's just, it's really big, and we can't just do it in our minds. We can't make sense of it just in our minds.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's where a lot of people recognize, like, I'm going to need some support with this, because it's hard to hold space for it all by yourself. Like, literally, being able to, like, okay, how's my hunger, fullness? What's happening with my body? Am I doing it right? All those kind of things. That's where a lot of that confusion kind of comes in, is because I'm not sure if I'm feeling this right or is this something else.
Right.
Culture's taught us, like, you've got to fix it, versus, what's happening here. We want to fix it with diets, cleanses, blah, blah, blah. Right.
Right. Right. Which, again, there's so much innocence in that.
Right. Exactly.
So I wasn't actually going to go here, but I was looking at some of the questions that when I posted a couple of questions in the group, just real last minute. So, or I posted a question in the group saying, like, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to be doing this interview. And it was last minute, so I just got a couple. And so I was thinking about those questions. Now, as you're saying this, and you've got somebody coming to you, and I want to bring those up in a moment, and they think that it's all about, like, okay, if I just get this intuitive eating thing right, if I just get the body thing down, everything's going to be good. And you can see that they're, like, stressed out of their minds, and this is the only thing that is holding them together. What is your first step with somebody like that? I should say not somebody, somebody that's in that situation.
Yeah. Honestly, my first thought is, like, what's that like for you to feel like that your only option is to, like, go on a diet?
Yeah.
You just drop right in to, like, where do we get that idea that every single time we feel fat or we feel uncomfortable, where do we get that idea that's actually about the size of our bodies, or that something's wrong? I do think that we get information from our bodies, and sometimes it is maybe the heaviness we feel, or the lethargy we feel, that could have something to do with our sleep or our intake or something. But we clamp down immediately to, like, okay, what did I do wrong, and how do I fix it with food, and how, should I do? We get into this mind space versus, I'm wondering what's going on right now.
Right. And that ties it in so perfectly, because one of the things that I had pulled from the last talk we had was you had said the uncomfortable sensations are real, but they aren't necessarily about your body size. And I think that we can get very confused, especially women. I think that we get told a lot that our feelings aren't real, especially because we have hormonal fluctuations and we can shift around a lot. And it's so beautiful, but we've been taught from a lot of angles that, like, oh, that's just not real. Or, like, when you're PMSing, that's just not real. So when we maybe start to hear the information that, oh, it isn't necessarily about food or your body, we just kind of throw our feelings out the window entirely and we stop feeling. Do you see that happening?
Absolutely. I think a lot of us go into this, like, numb place, and that is this, like, kind of learned experience. Like, if things weren't validated, we weren't seen and heard in some kind of way before, whether out of told, like, yeah, just, kind of suck it up, you'll be fine, toughen up, or just by omission of, like, something happened, we needed care, support, being seen, and just didn't happen. It wasn't necessarily negative, it just didn't happen. We kind of learn to do that to ourselves, and our culture reinforces that, like, that your feelings are in your head, but actually feelings are like little neuropeptides everywhere in our bodies. And the difference, and this is where the nuance of hunger fullness work is so important, is, like, let's say you're hungry, that's usually kind of upper, right? Like, underneath the bottom ribs here a little bit in that little space. But if, let's say, you have anxiety or some fear, that might have some, like, movement to it. It, like, might be bouncy or shaky, or feels like it's jumping around a little bit. Well, hunger usually doesn't do that. So what we're looking for is starting to kind of almost like, you have a curtain, and on one hand, like, okay, here's the body, like the biological hunger fullness, and here's this other information. And when we start to actually just accept that that's real and that's happening. You can be hungry but also anxious at the same time, or you can be full and anxious at the same time, and start to just learn the language, your personal language for all that. Again, it can take away the shame. It can take away some of the confusion of, oh, I was feeling really fat, or feeling like I wasn't doing the right thing, or I was feeling like I ate too much, and my brain wants to manage that, versus, no, I wonder what's feeling like so much right now.
Yes. And I feel like just the way that you're describing this pulls so much shame out of it, because I think when we say feel your feelings, people think often, and this was true for me for a long time, so I can speak from my own personal experience, that feeling feelings is like, oh, well, I feel sad. And then we go back up into our head about it, rather than saying,
Right.
like, oh, I feel this heaviness in my gut, like this really tangible physical sensation. Like that's what we're going for first when we say feel your feelings. And then you sort of see like, oh, this is the feeling that I match when I say sadness, or when I say anger, or anxiety, or when I reach for the diet or feeling fat. This is the sensation I'm feeling in my body. And that's at the most nitty gritty level, what we're running from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the language. It is the language of food and body talk. And you've heard me talk about that a ton on the group and other places. Is the language of food and body talk is always just that coupling of like using food and body as a way to kind of put in a container these other things that we don't know what to do with, that are confusing, that actually feel too much, that have been in our systems 1 week or 30 years too long, without any, just ability to like move through our systems and move on. It's like it's trapped, and it can feel big and a lot when we haven't looked at it in so long, or it's almost like it's in the closet and we're so scared of what we're going to find that we don't even want to go there. We'd rather hate our bodies because that's what we're used to. And we're kind of told that we should.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's socially acceptable. In a way, it connects us with other people. We can hate on our bodies with each other. So it's this sort of surface level of connection, which feels kind of safe, but we don't have any sort of real safety within ourselves without doing that.
Right. That's the key. It's like we wouldn't, and this is every single person who are listening to this, and you and I are in the same boat. Like we didn't have like a root, like a grounded, like I know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
It's really easy for that to be a little shaken. And we can know parts of and that's what's tricky, is like a lot of us are pretty competent, right? Like when we were restricting or binging a lot, it's like jobs, families, good grades, doing stuff. I mean, sometimes things eventually fall apart for all of us, but for the most part, managing stuff. But there's not much freedom, and there's a whole lot of internal chaos or turmoil inside that a lot of people won't see. And that's kind of the great suffering, is like you're doing the right things and you still feel bad, and that's why it's confusing. So maybe I should lose a little bit more weight.
Right. And
then I'll get there.
Yes. And even hanging on to that thought, it's often what keeps us going. Like, well, I'm working on it. I will lose the weight. And that is enough of a feeling of safety. Like it's not real safety, but it's kind of the illusion of it. And it keeps us going. And I feel like we have to honor that is the best that we knew how to do for a long time.
Yep.
Until we know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I see all this as 100% protective strategy. Nothing more, nothing worse or bad than that. It's just almost like it just is.
Yes.
So when people are struggling and they're like, okay, why am I thinking about going back on a diet? I've been intuitive eating for 1 day, 2 weeks, 3 years, 10 years. And I just kind of thought about going on a diet. My thought isn't like, well, why haven't you figured this out yet? My thought is like, oh, what's feeling like so much right now? Yeah. What's coming up?
Yes.
That's it.
And this is something that I wish that we could convey as we're chatting with people in the Intuitive Eating Facebook group, is tone. Just this like, oh, like, no, you're not doing anything wrong at all. And you can't always get that across as you're responding to and engaging with people. So I would love to take this opportunity to read a couple of these questions that I got from some of the people in our Facebook group. And I'd love to hear just how you would engage with a client sitting down in front of you and asking these questions. So the sort of surface question, and then everything that you see potentially underneath.
Great.
So
Sounds good.
the first one was sitting with feelings versus eating emotionally. Are they mutually exclusive? Sometimes I feel a memory or a fear creeping up and instantly I want a glass of wine or a sandwich. Sometimes I sit with the feeling because I know that thoughts and feelings are not permanent and will pass, but often I wait it out and I still have the wine and the sandwich. What am I doing wrong?
It doesn't sound like anything. That actually sounds like a person who has grown to be able to, like, sometimes I can be with that, sometimes I can't. So there's nothing wrong. I think that's probably the middle stage of the process where can feel that sensation, can either have a body memory that's popping up in your head, like you feel it, you know what that's connected to, and you're kind of uncoupling that. Or sometimes like there's a vague sense of like, I'm not okay. I don't know what that's about. I'm going to just be with it anyway. And sometimes at the middle of this process, we eat a sandwich anyway and kind of know that it's not really about hunger. That's okay. My thought would be, what would you need in that? And again, you and I are on the same page, Randy, about this. It's like emotional eating is definitely not the worst thing you can do when you feel like you need comfort. There are way more destructive things to do than to emotionally eat or emotionally overeat. More damaging things. It's not the worst thing at all. It's something we may need to do. But I know that everybody listening to this doesn't want that to be like, the number one choice, the go-to, because nobody wants to feel chronically like not feeling well physically. And if that could cause that to be happening for you. But, and everybody wants to grow in their skills of building resiliency in life. But just going back to the point here is, I would ask this person, like, okay, so is there anything in that moment that they can orient to that feels safe besides the sandwich or besides a glass of wine? Or is there anything so whatever that is in them, is there anything it wants to say? Or is there anything that's going, is there anything that it feels like it needs from you? Because you never know. It could be a younger part, just like, I just want you to pay attention to me and acknowledge that I'm sad. Could be, I don't have a clue. I just feel a pit in my stomach and I can feel that for a few seconds before I want to eat. It's like, okay, we'll feel that. And then can you find your feet? Mm-hmm. And then what happens with that pit in your stomach? And see what happens. And just kind of go back and forth and then maybe orient somewhere else, after your feet feel like, okay, I know that I'm here right now and that I'm the adult. That I've done a lot of really confident things, and this is how I know. We list out some things that as the adult that you've taken care of business about, you could be with. And that's kind of the process. You just kind of keep practicing those skills. There's lots of other things you can do thematically, of course, like exercises and other uncoupling and all that. But that's where I would start. It's like, so how else would you know that you're safe, besides the sandwich around you, or, whether it's sensory, it could be a smell, a sight, just sitting in your chair that you like and you feel it supporting your back. How else would you know?
Right. And do you also think, I think there's this is very subtle in here, this, what am I doing wrong? This assumption that the wine and the sandwich are wrong.
Right. Yeah. So like I said earlier, it's like, it's a way of like, just kind of even moving that sensation, making it less in your face and tense about it. It's almost like you're just literally taking the edge off or putting it, and it depends on how that would feel to that person. I would have to ask that person, like, okay, so when you drink, what happens to that sensation? Where does it go? Can you tell? Or do you just like, if something totally different happens for you?
And I think also, like you said, there's so much to celebrate here. This is somebody who's probably somewhere in the middle of their process, because so many of us have a very hard time even just sitting with a feeling. So the fact that that you're capable of sitting with a feeling and then you do sit with the feeling, like, that's huge. You've done some serious work there.
Absolutely. I was internally laughing in my head. Like, it was like 7 years before I figured out that my runs were about like running away from anxiety. I had no idea I was even anxious. I just I got to get up and run. That's just how I have to. I didn't have the resiliency to even be able to be curious.
Yeah.
So when I hear that, I'm like, wow, that's a big deal.
I know.
To be able to know that like my eating when I'm not hungry, there's general, like, normal human emotional eating. Like, it's Friday and I want to have pizza with my family, and that'd be fun. Totally emotional eating. It wasn't like I have to have pizza to be satisfied. It's like, oh, that sounds fun.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That should be, I would hope that and be included in most of our lives. But then there's another, like, this is the only strategy I have. Yes. And then we don't know it. We don't know that. We kind of know, but we just feel like we're out of control. And if we were to have more willpower, the beginning is like, this is out of control. I just don't have enough willpower. I suck. And then you're like, oh, I think I use this to, like, smush down the emotion or put it somewhere else, or this is it. I think it's doing something for me. And then it's like, you can see the stages there. It's not like either I know nothing or I'm fixed. It's something that, somewhere in the middle where it's like, I don't need it all the time. And isn't that awesome? That there's a lot of, like, built up, like, place to connect with. I'm okay. Or I can, I have enough. I'm okay enough. I can do this.
Yes. And I think that first, just celebrating all of that and what a huge deal it is that she's in that place. And then while she's doing, like, while there are times that she is able to, like, not do the wine and the sandwich, if that truly was a way of coping, there are times when she does, and to let that be okay, and to speak with the same amount of gentleness, like, okay, I felt the feelings, and then I ate, and I felt the way that they shifted, and I'm learning from this too, because I think we don't realize that we can spend a long time doing a certain things. I spent a long time doing these sit and feel my feelings, and then eat the food. Like, I just spent a long time doing that and letting that be okay. And that process, like, there was no, what am I doing wrong?
Right. I remember the same thing. Like, I got my raw cookie dough around me, probably knowing I'm going to eat the whole thing anyway, but I was able to, like, okay, I know I'm really sad. I know why, what's up. I just want to eat this anyway. That was a huge step to even, like, locate, like, this isn't just about, like, this is super fun, or I never get to have cookie dough because I'm always trying to diet. It's not just about that. Like, oh, there is the deprivation. There's a humiliation of the deprivation. There's, like, I don't feel like I can't or speak up about what I'm struggling with right now because it's too shameful. And that's why I'm eating. It was all those little pieces that, like, yeah, that's a lot. I'm going to go ahead and eat, but I get it that I need a different tool because this cookie dough is never going to fix all that.
And I think that we don't allow ourselves to celebrate these little moments. Even there's so much, what am I doing wrong? Because there's a part of us that thinks that's what's going to move us forward. Like, if we're ashamed, if we're feeling bad about it, if we're like, okay, what's the wrong piece, then that's going to move us forward. But it's really the opposite. It's like, okay, what is my good intention here? I chose to eat this anyways. So, like, how was I trying to take care of myself? What feelings was I trying to move?
That's right.
What is right about this? And that actually is what moves us forward. And I think we're very afraid of being there with ourselves.
Yeah. I want to add one little piece to that. I really want to encourage people, even if this makes you feel squirmy, that's something to, investigate or be curious about, is, like, just being, like, bring that internal caretaker, like the ideal mother kind of idea, like, oh, honey, of course you would do that with that level of intensity, or of course that you would need to do that because of where you are at in this process or what resources you have, of course. Yes. And I'm here for you. I see you. Yes. Not like, oh, I did it again. And, like, why can't I get it? Well, our brains are super smart, but they're not experts of, like, how to navigate sensations.
Yes. It's like you're learning a thing, and then you have this mothering, caring, nurturing voice that's walking you through it. And it's like, you've got this. I'm here. I so believe in you. You're figuring this out.
Yeah.
So the other question was, and I would love to hear both sides of this too. So the initial question, okay, what you feel might be underneath this. She says, I'd love to hear more about trusting set point theory. It doesn't seem to be discussed very often, or at least in detail. I'm sure a lot of beginners have a hard time trusting this concept.
Well, when I think about trusting set point theory, it's more like, if I was asked, if a client came in and asked me that question, I'm kind of like going to role play back and forth with myself here. I would ask, like, well, what about it don't you trust? Like, because we can find the origins of this stuff. Like, I learned about it through Reef and Reef. It was like a kind of a training eating disorder manual. And I don't remember the original people they got their research from, But, there are things that there's very, very little that can decrease that point. And there's a handful of things that can increase it. And I'm wondering what about that feels like you're struggling with. Usually when I ask that question to people, they'll tell me it's like they're having a hard time with it being true, or they kind of go into the shame spiral of well, my weight's higher because I chronically dieted and I did this to myself and that kind of thing. I think it's just hard to accept that we've done things to try to do the best we could because we thought it was right. And we didn't know because we didn't have the information. Actually our bodies know where they need to be. And we've been lied to for 150 something years plus of how our bodies know how to regulate themselves. One, we didn't know the science back then, and two, nobody cared because it was just about whatever was going on with the powers that be that push this stuff, So I think most times people struggle, we just have to grieve.
Yeah.
That, we don't have the willpower we've been made to believe that we do. Or we can, but with a high cost.
Yes.
And I think it's really difficult for us to just, this is where I'm at. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I'm struggling with that idea. And I don't want that to be true. But basically, asking ourselves, well, what do we need right now with this? And what's our options?
Do you feel like there's anything in there in not so much trusting the theory, because I feel like that gets us really, really heady again, but the fear of trusting our own bodies, well, my body couldn't possibly be that trustworthy.
Yeah, my body can be trustworthy, or kind of hoping that, well, maybe that doesn't include me. That point theory is for everybody else. I'm not saying this is what this person in the question was asking. I'm just going on potential things well, I hear you and I get that, but I don't want that to be true for me. Because again, it's scary to maybe, how hard was that? I mean, for me, how hard was that? I'm thinking for me, for that to land that you know what, you're not in control. You can try to make your body what you think it should be to help yourself feel a certain way. But ultimately, you're not that powerful.
Right.
And I think that's really scary.
Right. It's very, very scary because we have such a strong belief that, because we all want to feel free and we all want to feel content and we want to feel confident and happy in our skin. And there's such a strong belief that a certain body equals those things. And so it genuinely feels like this whole, if I feel my feelings I just feel like I'm going to die. It feels so intense. We feel like if we're letting go of this idea of our body being this perfect controlled way, we're letting go of the possibility of being at peace and content and happy and free and confident.
Right.
And that's not the case. We're giving all of those things to this outside source, this outside idea.
Right. I want to make sure I don't exclude any thoughts about set point theory.
Sure.
Is that just to kind of give that heady stuff and then come back to this, because really underneath the question of can I trust this is really, can I trust myself? And whether it's true or not, what's your experience? What's your experience with trying to eat no carbs during the first half of the day? What happens? How much does it actually help you regulate trust, or not regulate trust, but help you know that you're trustable? Or how much does it actually in the long run, what happens to your weight when we do that? What's your story with that? Because the theory is out there. I've seen it pretty much hold true with people. And it within set point theory, the things that, are there that can uptick our set point, and we know, are kind of repeated long-term, attempts to bring our weight below what it wants to be naturally with normal eating, moderate exercise, whatever. Sometimes medications can move it up. Some people, pregnancy, they don't do anything different than what they would have done, but their body just upticks a little bit, and that's where it wants to be in that circumstance. That's not everybody's story, but some people's it is. And there's a few situations, let's say I see clients, if they have lupus or other kinds of things that are autoimmune, and that can kind of mess up some things a little bit. And that's not everybody as well. But there's some things that those things we don't really have a lot of say over, except for how long we're trying to use dieting as a way to be somewhere we think we have to be happy.
Mm-hmm. And I love,
and I think that's kind of hard.
Yeah. And I love that you bring it back to like, well, what is your experience? Because there's lots of theories. Like, and I will say this sometimes to people in the group too, who are really, really like, does intuitive eating work? And is this whole idea true? And blah, blah, blah. And it's really, really just up in their heads and everybody's super anxious and freaked out. Well, okay, like scrap all the ideas. You don't have to do this. But
right.
What's your experience been with dieting, or like you said, like restricting carbs in the first half of the day, or whatever the thing is you've been doing for a long time, or you've been cycling on and off of it? How has that been working out for you? Let's look at our actual experiences.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to try something new and stay in our body as much as possible as we're learning how to do that as we go.
Right, right. I love that you said that, because that's when I give people advice. You can try this out. This is a paradigm shift, and it's an option of how to have a relationship with food and your body, doing this process. And everybody's entitled to like dip their toe in and out of it as much as they need to and want to, and tracking their experiences and recognizing if they don't want to, they don't have to. I always remind people, like, we were born this way, by the way. So it's not like this is a new thing. This is just something you're rediscovering in yourself, because the reason that any of us have had struggles with trusting our bodies is because we've had a reason not to trust them for some reason. Not because they're not trustable. This real life stuff has happened. Yeah. That we've been made to believe that they're not trustable, whether just our own innocent kind of putting things together that don't really go together, but that's kind of how it got coupled, or being told that like, you're not okay. People have been overly told I've had clients that have been put on diets when they were 3 years old because they were the 99th percentile baby, and they were off and on their whole life. So they don't remember really having like a ebb and flow of hunger and fullness and that being honored. So just because you don't remember it feeling, oh, I ate when I was hungry, then if the food wasn't good, I went and played and got hungry later, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was easy. If they don't remember that, just to know that, like, this is actually inherently how we're wired to be.
Mm-hmm.
The other stuff is learned. Everything else is learned, and I'm so grateful for that, because we can learn new stuff. We can unlearn what doesn't work anymore. We can try out some new stuff.
Yes, absolutely. The things that were conditioned into us as children when we didn't have the capacity to do anything different, but the sort of automatic go for the control or go for the food, and so understandable. Our systems are amazing, the way that they learn to cope with things, and we learn to survive in very stressful circumstances. But as adults, we have such a huge capacity to rewire and relearn and create whole new systems that have a completely different experience.
Right. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
The only piece, it's amazing. All of these little pieces that I had written down from the last talk, it was like you read my mind, because some of them you almost verbatim spit back to me without me even asking you about. And I think the only one that I didn't get to is that for some people, you had talked about, you dive into the mental and emotional work right away. But for others, like, for example, so say somebody that you're working with has been, was put on a diet when they were a tiny baby, and it's been with them for a long time, this trauma. It's important maybe to stick with the food stuff and build up resilience and a sense of safety first. So what does that process looks like? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so we're looking at the food and non-judgmentally, just looking for what people can feel, what they can't feel, where things need to be structured, where things can be a lot looser. And I'm really just working towards people, we got to eat enough. It's so hard whether you identify as, even if you don't identify as like, I feel like I don't eat enough, I see, so much deprivation-driven eating from people that like, I don't highly restrict. I look at their food and it's like, it's still a little restrictive. Sometimes it's actual physical, and it's not like, oh my goodness, you need like another half of all your intake a day to like get up to the place your signals will be accurate. But sometimes it's just a little bit here or there where people just take the edges off, and it's like, it's just so what they're used to. They're not used to like, I'm good and done. That experience feels scary, overwhelming. Oh my goodness, that'll make me gain weight. And we really are just trying to help people find their edges of like, what is true? little hunger? What's true louder hunger? What's that like? What does that mean for you? And then the other end of the spectrum, like what's get by enough fullness, and what happens for you in your day when you stay there more, when you act, then if you give yourself permission, you get a little bit more of like, I'm good and done. This lasts me a couple more hours. Again, most of us don't know internally, like what our edges are. And that work kind of happens. You want to have something that stays stable for you. So sometimes it's that. And once you kind of feel more comfortable, it's like, oh yeah, I got this. I can feel, I know what I'm starting to trust a little bit. Like that's enough. And that food's getting kind of boring to me. I never thought that would happen. That work's super important. To be able really to know with some clarity, hunger, or fullness. Because what starts to happen is you're able to separate out at that time, oh, this is my physical hunger, this is my physical fullness, and here's this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's a little easier to know what's what versus you're just trying to fish for things you're not sure. And I don't like to lead people in places that I don't like to lead in terms of I think this is what's happening. I need them to see that right this second. It's like, okay, well, that's there. What's going on with your hunger, physical hunger, fullness? And, I don't try to I go at the pace that I feel like the slowest parts of people can go, which is I don't want people to get so scared that they get too much, get flooded. I don't want to do this. I'm going back on a diet.
Yes. And if people are nervous about working with somebody, so say they're trying to let go of diets, trying to accept their bodies, trying to learn how to listen and to understand their stress and their compulsions and all of this, and maybe they fear that working with a coach or a therapist or somebody that could guide them through this might be too extreme. Maybe there's this fear of you're going to make them let go of something or push them. It doesn't sound like that's the case at all.
No, in fact, that really probably isn't ethical. It's not ethical. It's not ethical to make people do things that they don't want to do.
Yeah,
it's a difference between life and.
We're so used to pushing ourselves.
Yeah,
but I think that's what people think.
That's true.
Your coach is just going to push you, but often I feel like we're slowing people down, not slowing them down, just settling, helping them settle a little.
It's more about settling and knowing well, what are you going to work on today? What feels important to you? What part of your life is I'm over this. Okay, let's go there. I'm not going to make people do body image stuff the first day because really what they want to do is stop binging. Okay, let's do that. Yeah. Let's slow things down to where at a pace where you feel like you can do to where you understand what's happening, what the function of this is, what you actually need. This other stuff's going to come. Mm-hmm. It's all going to come. Whether you start with right through intuitive eating, and then people start to feel more trusting of themselves, maybe more trusting of me or of you, to say more about something else. Oh yeah, I was wondering about that. I kind of had that sense, but I'm glad that you told me, or whatever. At least from my perspective, coaching or counseling or whatever, that's more partner versus I'm the authority. Yes. You don't know anything or do what I do. That's diet culture.
Exactly. And
diet culture.
Right.
Partnering is I'm going to join with you. Yes. And we're going to hold this space together for whatever needs our attention and go at the pace that you can go at to where you're still living your life. Stuff isn't totally hitting the fan where you can't function. And you're growing. Even if you don't see it, I can see it. And yeah.
And to that point, what you were talking about earlier, how a lot of us are very competent in many areas of our lives. Maybe maybe we run businesses or we're taking care of our family, or we're doing all these things, and we've got this area of our life that just feels out of control. When people come to me and they have this sort of freaked out, oh my God, what is my coach going to make me do? It's the same thing. Hey, I'm with you on this. And there are probably some things that you could teach me about life. This is just the thing that I have a bit more perspective on, and let's walk through this together. And as far as creating safety, what I'm hearing you say is first it's letting people be where they're at, what's right on your plate, right in front of you, freaking you out the most. And then how can we let you see these little bits of progress and then sustain them? It's a little bit of, I can do that. This is what hunger feels like. And then you move forward.
Yeah.
what do you do then when somebody's feeling a bit more grounded? They're like, okay, yeah, I've got this. I can understand hunger. I can understand fullness. What would be the next step in expanding nervous system safety in the body, maybe even into being able to work with body image?
So it's interesting as you're talking, like, well, do I ever do things just separately? And the answer is no. There's always a little bit of like, and what was that like for you? That builds safety right there, because when you're with a competent, safe other, it's just there for you. You know, I'm not trying to get anything from you. I know that like somebody might be working with me and there's an exchange or whatever, but there's a level of like, I don't really want to know, because I don't know everything. You're the expert in your body, and you're the one with these lived experiences. So I have a lot of experience with all kinds of folks. Yeah. But I don't know exactly, whenever you describe that sensation, where that's located, what that feels like for you, what it's even like to be present to that. So it's almost like you're doing regulation right there. Like nervous system regulation, decreasing stress is happening right that second. When you're with somebody and they're not rattling off, you know, when you and I are talking a lot, but in a session, there are some times that like, you know, I'm asking questions and prompts and eliciting things that like, if I'm doing all the talking, there's a problem.
Yes.
A big problem. I might be directing, or yes, prompting, or like, and say more. What's happening there? Tell me what that's like for you. And ooh, sad, huh? Like we're doing that, but that already is like you get space to just be yourself in that moment. That's regulating.
Yes. And go ahead.
So it's nervous system regulation right there. It's just small, and it's just building a little chink. And then when you do that with yourself, with your food journal, or you slow down with making your dinner, or it's like, you know, I'm really craving blah, 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 and you take the time to go do that. That's been seeing and heard, that's regulation. So you do it inside and outside the session. And when it feels difficult to do it, you're even noticing that feels difficult. That's regulation. So it's always happening. Once you start to learn the language of like, you know, really just showing up.
Right. And sometimes
being serious.
It does require having somebody come in and being that safe, non-judgmental space that lets you just settle in, because what you're doing is you're showing them like, hey, this is the sort of thing you can give to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and here's an example of that.
Absolutely.
Because it's not right that you want to work with somebody for the rest of their lives. Like, this is not that situation. Right. You want to make somebody capable and you're resilient.
Right. My job isn't to, my job is to help you build your resilience, to learn who you really are, and to help you trust yourself. So you don't need me or somebody like me ever again. That's always my hope. So, you know, it is a process, but it's not meant to be like, I need somebody forever to do this. Now we all have a relationship, and that's super healing. And I think that's what the healing part of all this is. We heal in relationship, for the most part. Relationship with ourselves, relationship with other competent. When I say competent, all that means is that they're willing to like be present to you, and it's not all about them. There's a give and take. You know, so that's how we heal. I would say when we answer that question, like, well, when do you work with body image and when you do somatic? Well, they all kind of go together. It's just sometimes things have a more forefront. You know, so one session it may be mostly hunger, fullness work. Another session it may be somebody comes in pretty frazzled or kind of like, you know, I don't know what happened. I was just kind of out of it this week. And so we just start, can we juice things up a little bit? Can we help you settle and do that? And then get to maybe the thing they wanted to work on last week that they didn't quite get to. Or maybe the thing that they're still kind of spinning on that they just need, I can hear that information now because I couldn't remember it this week. Or sometimes it's just a body image session and we're working through, I feel fat and what's connected with all that. What feels like too much or whatever. And then it gets to the food part, or it starts with the food part and it goes somewhere else. My sessions are kind of like these podcasts. It's like we have a starting point and we might go from A to B, or we might get to B through like A, B, C, or A and a half, 1, 2, 3, B.
Which can be a little scary. Like I will certainly have people say like, okay, what's your process and what am I going to need to do? And it's like, well, I don't there's not one single process, because not everybody has had the same history. Not everybody is dealing with the same sorts of situations. And like you said, you're not going to force body work on somebody who's so freaked out they can't even feel their feet on the floor yet. Like, let's work with what's at the forefront.
Right. If you're in a situation where like sitting down to a meal, it's just really hard. Like, well, can you stand for a meal? And you, if you have to move around, can you move around 1 minute less and then do whatever you're doing? Whatever. So we just start where you're at.
Yes. Beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to share on this topic, or anything that you'd like to share with our group on Facebook or the Intuitive Eating, Attuned Eating group at large?
Oh my goodness. I think I was thinking about everything we talked about today. To sum it up in curiosity, compassion, and courage. And also those things help that part of us that gets really scared, and that part of us that feels shame. And we're just so used to feeling shame that we do go back to like worrying about like, well, I haven't done enough movement yet, or what about movement? When am I going to do that? Or when is the healthy eating going to happen? And just coming back to like, nobody's saying that those things aren't going to happen. Mm-hmm. It's right now, you're in whatever season you're in with this process. You're not doing it wrong. What do you need to feel more safe right now? I just want to come back to like you have that compassion and curiosity. What do I need to feel more grounded and more safe right now in this process? Whether it's a piece of information, somebody just to hear say like, yeah, I've been there. I get it. You're not screwing up. And the courage part is to like, oh, I can really feel myself wanting to do that thing. I know there's a function for that. And can I tolerate one step in the other direction, even though I want to do the other thing that I'm really used to? Mm-hmm. Courage is big because even if you're listening to this, you've got some guts, because the majority of the population isn't going to hear this.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you've made it to the end, like, this is all for you. It's exactly where you're at and what you need. And I love when you said courage, just the ability to ask ourselves like, hey, can you handle that? Can you handle this today? Could you handle this step today? Like, I've got your back. We can handle this.
Absolutely. Yeah. If they're, and even handle this is like our really, not trying to like mince with words. It's like handle the ones like, I see your capacity to do this, to hold this. Like, mm-hmm. Can you hold one more molecule of hearing?
Yes.
That even though you binged last this week.
Yes.
Can you take that? Can you take that in?
Anything that softens, I think, because even as you talk, like, I feel my body softening. And I think that that's a cue that we can use for ourselves. Like, if you can ask yourself to do something and your body is like, oh yeah, I can do that. That's what you follow. But if you sort of tense up and it's like, okay, I think I can push myself through that, then maybe it's like, pull back a little. That's okay.
Too fast. Yeah. Good. Perfect. It's too fast. Too much. That's like too much. So it may be that like, you're not going to bring in food. You've heard like, say with intuitive eating, I know we'll kind of wrap up after this, but when you hear about intuitive eating and have all the foods, that stuff may not be for you right now. It may be, well, I want to have cookies, but I know that if I bring them home, I'm going to binge on the whole thing tonight. Like, I'm going to eat that whole 3-sleep Oreo pack, which I've done. I'm going to do that. Stuff's going to happen. Even though I love the idea, I'm really hungry for that idea and I want that. It's, well, maybe I can have Oreos with a friend in an amount that, I feel like I can do in full view with somebody.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And then I'll work towards, maybe I can have them by myself and like like you can get the packs that are smaller or whatever. And then I can bring the whole thing in and it'll last me more than one day. Can you take that in? That you can only go as fast as, a certain part you can go.
Yes.
It's okay.
I love that. I'm going to wrap it up on that because I feel so satiated and relaxed, and I'm hoping that is what everybody who's listening is feeling also. Thank you so much for this. Just like last time, all of your information will be in the show notes. So for anybody who would be interested in reading Tracy's blogs or working with her, or looking at any of her programs, I'll put that in. And I'll also put in the link to the Facebook group, the Intuitive Eating support group that both of us are admins, and Tracy's sort of the head honcho. She's been around for a while over there. You're absolutely welcome there. And thank you so much for listening to this. Thank you so much for doing this again.
Oh, Randy, gosh, it's just, it gets a little gushy, but it's just an honor to be able to share the nuances of the process. So people, you and I do this because we don't want people to be floundering around as long as we did. There's a level of hunger for freedom and not knowing there's actually little steps to do it. It doesn't have to be so alone.
Yes. And I would just love to see you out there more. I was looking on iTunes and I saw you on Christy Harrison's podcast. And then of course here, and I'm just oh my gosh, get this woman out. Your demeanor is so soothing and so opening and expanding. Every time I talk to you, I just feel so open. It's so wonderful. So I'm just really, really happy to share.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad that we can provide this for people. That's the point. So thank you everybody for listening. And if you made it to this point, wow, this is a lot. So good for you.
We'll tie it up. Awesome.